For a short time, 50 Cent was hip-hop's biggest cash cow. From music to sneakers, merch, and even a video game series, there was a point when everything 50 touched turned to gold. Fast forward to today and his earning power is back to full force, with his farewell tour becoming the second tour in hip-hop history to rake in over $100 million. And while you could probably guess what Canadian artist was the first to achieve that feat, what's more impressive is that 50 managed to do it after basically having his music career sabotaged. Throughout his career, 50 Cent has been written off more than once by people who once backed him. Sometimes it was because he seemed like damaged goods, other times it was because the rap game shifted. But while many believe that his infamous loss to Kanye marked the beginning of his downfall, what if I told you that his downfall was actually a carefully orchestrated master plan by his own record label? And when you look back upon 50's career, it might be easy to see why. The man in question is Jimmy Iovine, the head of Interscope, who served as the parent company on the labels 50 appeared on. Signing to Interscope back in 2002, 50 was seen as such a cheat code that he was immediately granted his own imprint just a year later. Starting with his legendary album Get Rich or Die Trying, 50 and his crew would deliver 6 straight platinum albums. Despite this monumental success, obstacles and circumstances arose that led Iovine to push 50 aside. But to paint a full picture, we need to look back at the other rejections 50 had faced throughout his life. Born without a father, 50 found mentors on the streets in the shape of people like Kenneth Supreme McGiff, only for the drug trafficker to be the very man who'd put a hit out on him and lead to him nearly perishing from 9 gunshots. Then, as his music career began, he was given guidance by Jam Master Jay of Run DMC, who he credits with teaching him how to write songs. Throughout his career, 50 said that those early experiences with Jam Master Jay would be an invaluable tool, with the young 50 using his tutelage to learn how to make hit records. But he would be gunned down just a day after 50 released his debut album in a mystery that remained unsolved until February this year. Prior to that, 50 had seized a deal with Columbia Records when he initially gained momentum in the streets, but that would be extinguished after he got shot 9 times. Unceremoniously dropped from the label, 50 suddenly had to start from scratch just days before his album was originally supposed to come out. For most people, this could have been the end, but he stuck it out.
My deal at Columbia allowed me to be in the building as an artist instead of someone that they wouldn't offer the information to. And I went there every day like I worked there until I kind of had some sort of sense of what was going on. When I got dropped from Columbia because I got shot, then I got dropped off the label. The information that I acquired is the only thing that saved me to get back.
With that resilience, he went on an iconic mixtape run before catching the eye of Eminem, Dr. Dre, and finally, Jimmy Iovine. From there, the meteoric rise of 50 Cent took place, including his diamond-certified debut album. After that came Shoe Deals, a movie based on his life, and an expansion of G-Unit to the point that oversaw the careers of new talents like The Game and Olivia, as well as vets like Mobb Deep and M.O.P. And due to how immensely successful he'd become, he gave off the appearance of an overnight success, even if in reality, he was anything but that. At the beginning of their career, 50 and Jimmy apparently had a healthy dynamic. After all, 50 was the one who was making endless revenue for Interscope. The only thing he was angered by was 50's business model and its inclusion of mixtapes, which led him to threaten to throw 50's DJ Who Kid, in jail. Apart from 50 and Who Kid's insistence on feeding the streets with mixtapes, Jimmy had 50's corner during his initial run. He even previously stood by him when a conflict threatened to fracture the entire Aftermath and Interscope family, as when 50 and The Game were beefing, the support of Iovine ensured that it was The Game that was ousted by Dre and Jimmy, not him, even if that decision was more financially motivated than any type of loyalty.
Financially and infrastructurally, he had to take sides with 50. It made sense because that's where the bulk of the money was being made. And so at that point, you didn't want to piss 50 off because he was the breadwinner.
With that, it seemed like they were set up to remain an unstoppable force. But that was until the first signs of friction emerged when 50's grip on hip-hop began to loosen. At which point, Jimmy was less inclined to let him do whatever he wanted. And this is where the friction began. It was 2007 and 50 remained the ultimate industry titan at the time. But an alternative to his hard-edged gangster rap was rising in the shape of Kanye West's more thoughtful, conscious, and sonically inventive take on the culture. And on one fateful day, the two were set to square off when their respective third albums, Curtis and Graduation, were set to drop simultaneously. Known for his immense bravado, 50 challenged Kanye to a sales contest, pledging to retire if Ye outsold him. Back then, he probably didn't imagine that would have ever happened, but that's exactly what occurred. Quickly, 50 backpedaled on the retirement claims and was suddenly forced to taste humility for the first time in his career. With such an immense machine like Interscope Records behind him, it seemed inconceivable that he would ever lose. But as Joe Budden put it, this was a conspired plan to put him in his place.
This was, in my humble opinion, one of the music industry's greatest tricks.
But first, real quick, I want to talk to you about our sponsors, MyHeritage. If you didn't know, my name is Spencer Zachary, and in addition to voicing these videos for HipHopMadness, I'm a musician and digital nomad. Over the last 9 years, I've traveled to and lived in over 13 countries, from Brazil to Thailand to Spain, and these travels have molded me into who I am today, and that's all thanks to my grandma. Conversations over the years with her about her life and her upbringing sparked a curiosity into my roots, which led me to research my family tree, and thanks to MyHeritage, I've been able to fill out even more of my personal history. For example, on my Filipino mother's side, I just found out the names of 4 of my great-grandparents, which I didn't know before. And on my dad's side, with a little bit more digging, I was able to find my grandma's marriage certificate from 1952 and a little bit of information about her father, who grew up and lived in North Carolina back in the 1900s. With a wealth of powerful features at your fingertips, you can search over 33 billion historical documents to find records on your ancestors. One of my favorites is Instant Discoveries, where at the click of a button, you can generate entire family lines, find historical photos, and even use AI to colorize these photos and bring them to life through animation. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's more than names and dates and old photos and documents. It's about finding the stories that connect you to who you are. I've gone down the rabbit hole myself, spent hours on the site, and every new discovery felt like it was a mystery crafted just for me. So are you ready to see where your past can take you? Click the link in the description and start exploring now. So again, get your 14-day free trial when you click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen right now. All right, let's get back to the video.
After album 1 and 2 from 50 Cent, there was no more polarizing figure in hip hop than 50 Cent. 50 was really arrogant at this time. On everybody at Interscope, he on Jimmy Iovine. There was a long run of that, right? I was somewhere saying that you can't on the label, you just can't on the label no matter how powerful you are. And then we had this. This is a marketing masterpiece.
From there, Joe contended that because Def Jam and Interscope had the same parent company in Universal, the whole thing was manufactured just to take 50 down a peg and usher in a new wave of hip-hop that was led by Kanye West.
We couldn't figure out why 50 and Kanye face-to-face on magazine covers talking about who will sell more was a big deal. Anybody with a brain could tell you that 50 was going to sell more. This was not a competition. This is label orchestrated. This is manufactured. This is Universal saying we have had enough of 50 Cent and his arrogance.
As Joe said, prior to the release of Curtis was exactly when the first signs of friction began to emerge between Interscope and 50. So as he reeled from the defeat to Kanye, 50 predictably didn't take any accountability for the loss. Instead, he suggested that people wanted him to fall purely because he was on top. When I released records that they would consider a hit record for another artist, for me they said it was a lukewarm response. In the history of entertainment, they build entertainers in order to destroy them. I think they were giving me resistance. Yet later on, in a rare moment of self-reflection, 50 admitted, I guess it's just timing. I had the records, I just launched the wrong ones at the wrong time. After that, his initial relationship with Interscope continued to spiral downhill, and by 2009, there was significant tension leading up to the release of his 4th album, Before I Self-Destruct. At one point, 50 even claimed that he didn't want to release a commercial project for fear of another flop. Still, when the album did eventually drop, it underperformed more than any other 50 record up to that point. But things were only set to get worse, and Before I Self-Destruct would go down as the last album he'd ever release on Interscope. By the time that 50 was back to working on a new album in 2012, tensions between him and Interscope had reached an all-time high. In a series of deleted tweets, 50 voiced his frustration with Interscope and how they were managing his career. Refusing to drop anything that Interscope could sell, 50 just kept dropping mixtapes. But the thing that really led to the downfall of 50's relationship with Jimmy Iovine and his subsequent departure from Interscope wasn't actually the music itself, but headphones? Because around that time, Dre and Jimmy Iovine had been making a fortune from Beats headphones. Over time, 50, who had always had a broad business portfolio, had actually set up his own headphones range called SMS, a direct competitor to Beats. According to 50, this drove a major wedge between them, which now began to affect his relationship with Dre. Although he relented on that, 50 would leave the label in February of 2014, with Eminem being the only one to wish him well. But while M saluted him on his way out and 50 plotted to release Animal Ambition, his former ally would effectively stifle his music career. And in interviews, 50 said it all came down to his attempts to branch out.
I met with Jimmy and they had already exited the music business. They was in the headphone business at that point. So I had SMS because I was looking at Jimmy's move towards beats like Russell Simmons' move towards Fat Farm. Because of Russell's move towards Fat Farm, we knew that you could take interest generated through hip hop and music culture to create urban clothing and it can be successful.
From there, he felt that he was basically blackballing him.
And I'm sitting here talking to him about a record that it's hard for me to believe you can't get it played. It's a record with me Eminem and Adam Levine. And neither one of the two artists I'm featuring on the record with haven't had a record that wasn't a #1 record that charted. And you telling me you're having a hard time getting it played? So it felt like they was just putting me to bed right there. And he going, in that conversation, he's like, I don't know, maybe, and he points to the TV. And I'm looking, and as much as I didn't like the conversation that we was having, after the fact, when I'm actually thinking about what just transpired, I keep remembering he was pointing to the TV. He didn't advise me that maybe you go in this direction, or he didn't help me or aid me in any way going in that direction. But he said, I don't know, man. At that point, he was no longer in support of me to say. That's what that meant. It means you're on your own. After a while, I got agitated with the way they was carrying me with Interscope Records, and I told them that I hurt them. Because I don't know how to respond to a person that's doing something to me, and I'm not doing anything bad.
Left feeling abandoned by the man he once made hundreds of millions for, 50 insisted that things were about to turn left if he stayed on Interscope for any longer. And finally, in April of 2014, 50 claimed the following. During the last communication I had with Jimmy, he tells me he doesn't like me. At that point, everything else doesn't matter. Just get me off the actual label before it goes bad. Because I'm not getting the actual response I want out of the music I'm releasing with them. And it's to the point where I'm not even trying to put albums out. I'm just sitting here like, if you can't get a song with M and Adam Levine on radio, then what can you do? I'm prejudiced. I don't like people that don't like me. Still, despite the fallout, 50 saw leaving Interscope and signing a deal with Caroline as the beginning of a new era. Along the way, he hinted that there were also financial issues that may have strained Ivine on the way out, adding yet another layer to their rocky relationship.
It's my reintroduction. Because it was my 5th and final album requirement for Interscope, we was in a position where we would have to do audits and go through the books and everything, and then there was conflicts in different areas. Like my album, Get Rich or Die Trying, is the largest debut in hip-hop album, and the way we sold ringtones at that point is exactly how we sell the single. So the language in the contracts spoke to the same light, and the way I would be paid off a ringtone, if I argued that that was the way I was to be paid off of the singles, would mean that they owed me like another $23 million maybe. We went through that process, and it took for 4 years actually. It took a while for us to get through it, and then I was paid. And then, like what I was getting out of the response to the action music made me feel like I lost that camaraderie we had at one point.
But not every interview was so inherently positive, and in an interview with Ebro,
I experienced something that was really interesting during the time span. They treated it like I was a direct competitor. How can you do what you need to do for the music when you feel like I'm your competing company? I didn't even deliver my last album to Interscope. They let it go before it got bad.
On other occasions, he revealed that it wasn't just Jimmy that was the problem. Apparently, the scenario also took a toll on his bond with Dre, to the extent that he started to reassess if there was ever real love there, or if he was merely a commodity to him. I don't call to talk to Dre for no reason, he said in a since-deleted interview with The Breakfast Club. I think that relationship was business. For a long time, I was a New York Knicks player in the middle of a LA locker room. You have to realize, Interscope was the West Coast label. I never really saw them respond properly to the game's disrespect, because they had some sort of allegiance to the West, and I didn't understand it. I was like, I wrote the game's records, right? In the same interview, Tony Yayo vouched for 50, saying, I almost violated my parole for Dre. We beat somebody up for Dre. I can say it now, no disrespect to LA, but it was a whole bunch of New York dudes beating somebody up for Dre. He's cool, I like his music and everything. I just feel like when you beat somebody up, I feel like they owe you a little bit. And you consider the self-belief that 50 had, it's no surprise that he wasn't daunted by the prospect of releasing Animal Ambition on his own imprint with Caroline. It's freedom to invest in your own ideas, he said at the time. If I ever had a horse that I was betting on, I'd like to be the horse. Let it be me, goddammit, because I'm gonna run as hard as I can. Released on June 3rd, 2014, the album debuted at number 4 on the charts, but it marked the end of his streak of RIAA certified albums, and to date, it's the last record he ever released. Since then, 50 has diverged into television and movies, becoming a mogul in a whole different mold. But ever since Interscope decided to put the brakes on his music career, the musical aspect of his career has never recovered, and his long-awaited album, Street King Immortal, still hasn't emerged. But now, Jimmy Iovine makes it out as though it's all water under the bridge, and all the friction never existed.
I don't dislike 50 Cent. Never stopped liking 50 Cent whatsoever. He came to my office. I said, 50, I'm not even sure if I like you, but I'm gonna give you a great idea. You need to get into television. And he recently has said that day that I said that to him is one of the days that inspired him to do television. It was meant more as a joke. He's one of those guys that just, drive you nuts. But I dig him, man. We had a lot of success together. When I have a lot of success with somebody, I'm not gonna dislike them.
For 50, it seems like he's gotten over it, thanking Iovine while receiving his star at the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Then, at a London tour date, Dre and Iovine surprised him to show their appreciation. But if the story of 50 and Interscope teaches us anything, it's that no matter how good things may appear, it only takes one misstep in the music business for things to go south. Then, as soon as you're no longer the profitable commodity you once were, you will be exiled.